We're ready to rock. So we've got 30 minutes to dive into this first panel. What investors want in 2025. As I just covered, in that quick talk, the world is moving quickly, and what investors want and what technologists are building and what patients and health systems need are shifting. And so we're going to have a conversation about what we want, hopefully in 2025, and where that's going to take us in investing in medtech into 2030, 2035. We have three amazing panelists. I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. The first question is sort of, what do you think investors want in 2025? Tell us a little bit about your background, your firm, and what you see in this space. Starting with Chris.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Chris Japp. I'm a partner in a venture fund based in New Mexico. We have two offices, one in Santa Fe and one in Albuquerque. We invest across the spectrum in medtech, biotech, and health tech. We're currently on our third fund. We have 8 companies in our portfolio. And a bit about New Mexico. I have to give you a bit of a New Mexico commercial here. When you think of New Mexico, you probably don't think of medtech that much. We're not exactly a Boston or a Bay Area. When you say New Mexico, you often think of Breaking Bad or meth dealers or crime or stuff like that. But you'd be surprised how much we have. With 2 national labs, Sandia and Los Alamos, we have a tremendous amount of early stage technology. And just watching Daniel's presentation, I'm just so excited about connecting these kind of applications with the kind of technology we have coming out of our labs. From a personal background, I spent 35 years in the medtech world, working at a whole variety of different companies, GE Healthcare, Boston Scientific, St. Jude Medical, Hitachi Healthcare, Pentax Medical. So I've had the good fortune to work across a large number of clinical spectrums. I like to say that I'm an expert in nothing, but I know a little bit about a lot of things. And that's a little bit about our fund. I'll pass it over.
I'm Akhilesh. I'm a partner at MVM. We're also an investor in healthcare broadly. So we do a lot of med tech, also do health tech, pharma, some tech-enabled services. Focus on growth stage companies. So we like to invest in those that are in the market, generating revenue and looking for capital to scale. As a firm, we're in the more classical locations, Boston, London, and here in the Bay Area. Then my background, I'm a physician by training and shifted from that to the MVM team.
Hello, my name's Ella Lee. I'm the founding partner of H7 BioCapital. We do syndicate investment with a check size from $100K to $2 million. Primarily focus on C to Series A stages. We look at a company in therapeutic drug discovery space, medical device, and AI in medtech. We also have a accelerator program that runs once a year, designed to help seed companies to achieve their commercialization success. I'm a PhD trained along with our other partners, so we really focus on the companies with a deep tech and a really strong clinical validation data. We have also a BD team to help our biotech portfolio company with high potential asset to licensed asset to big pharma or MNC. It's a really pleasure to be here.
Great, thanks everybody. So the world's shifted, like we had sort of the pre-pandemic world, the pandemic investing world, some hype around digital and other realms, and now sort of not quite post-pandemic. What's something that might have excited you, in the last 5-10 years that now doesn't move the needle, that folks should be mindful of when they're pitching you a company or building a new one? Anyone want to go first?
I might be a little controversial here, but I'm going to be very careful how I say this. One area we see overhyped quite a bit is AI. I think 5-10 years ago, when it was more an emerging kind of technology, we saw a lot of things that were I would call platform AI technologies that were right across the spectrum. Now we're a little more careful of that. And I think to Daniel's presentation, the very specific applications of AI and how it can be used in clinically validated fantastic applications. We think there's a tremendous future of it, and to use an old phrase, you either have to be on the train or off the train. But now we're a little more careful of seeing how that is pitched or used in a technology, for example. I can't tell you how many pitches I see where something is called AI-driven or AI included. And it's like, oh God, come on. It's like 3 lines of code for some device. It's not really AI. But people feel they need to put it in a pitch. So we're a little more careful now about how that will actually get used.
Yeah, I'd say we're in the same boat. Totally agree with that. And it's something that we try to be a little bit cautious around. I think more generally for us, the criteria that we use to evaluate investments has stayed pretty consistent over time. I mean, we're thinking about what are technologies that have a clinical impact, address a large market, have a sustainable business model, and a strong team. And so that has been very constant. I think that some of the areas where the investor groups more broadly have focused over the last couple of years is around that point around sustainability of the business model. So ensuring that a company is not pursuing growth at all costs, which was very trendy in sort of the 21, 22 timeframe, but ensuring that there is a path to profitability. And so I think that may be where there's been some change, but overall, I think the things that make a company exciting for us are, what was true a few years ago is true now.
Yeah, so I agree with our peers about what a field focus. I want to also add something we observe. Before, for instance, company backed up by top tier VC or getting the funding support or partnership with MNC, big pharma is a big sign. So of course, it's still a really positive sign showing get a endorsement or validation in some level. But we also found out very often, for instance, the company that are conducting some partnership or have a partnership or getting the corporate venture doesn't really guarantee the commercial success. And major reason behind it is the corporate venture is holding a very different investment strategy rather than VC. So they are more often invest more for the strategic reason rather than really the financial reason. So with a much deeper pocket and with a much higher risk tolerance level, they are really chasing different goal rather than the VC. So we are also so now we are more cautious about how to really weigh that factor.
Yeah, I think if I can add, that's a great point. And if I can add to that too, just like many of the founders in the room, the struggles you're having to raise capital in the current environment, even as a venture firm, we also have to raise capital from our limited partners. And one change I've seen this year, there's more emphasis on faster exits, and by faster I mean, not 10 years from now, but you want to see something 3 to 5 to 7 years from now. A lot more pressure on us to do that. So the kind of opportunities we're looking at now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the billion-dollar or multi-billion-dollar opportunity far in the future. We're more interested in maybe faster exits or better potential to be acquired by a corporate company in 3 to 5 years.
In terms of faster, you've seen evolution of the speed of, or the stage at which people present. What used to be a Series A is now a seed or a pre-seed. And now with some of these convergent technologies, you can build a prototype, get it out there in new ways that wasn't possible a decade ago. Any examples of companies in your portfolio that have sort of built things differently and in more nimble ways that have been more capital efficient?
Yeah, I think that we are seeing a little bit more of that. I mean, for us, we're a later stage investor, so we come in at the growth stage. The company has a fully baked product. They've entered the market. But I think that given the pressure on the fundraising environment over the last couple of years, we have seen companies adapting to being able to get to market a lot quicker. And so then we come in with a growth round, and they're able to use those dollars wisely. So I do think you're seeing more of that efficiency with capital now.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And I think the other thing we look for when we deploy our capital into a company, and we'll see the typical pie chart of, okay, here's how the capital is going to be utilized, whether it's seed stage or Series A or Series B. And you've got this portion going to R&D, you've got this portion going to regulatory and whatever. What we'd like to see now is a little bit of, I hate the word slush fund, but that's really what it is. Having maybe 20% reserved for the stuff that's going to go wrong, or maybe it's going to take a bit longer to get to the next stage. And we're seeing that a lot with our companies now, especially the ones that are getting towards the commercial stage. It is difficult to get past that part of the curve, and the fundraising in that part is getting more difficult. So we're seeing more of our portfolio companies looking to raise bridge rounds or convertible notes, which is something we typically don't do to get them to the next stage.
I guess when we talk about efficiency, the other thing that comes to mind is there is some trade-off between time and capital. So, to that point, we are seeing companies that are getting through time with more of these bridge rounds. So what that enables them to do is get farther along with less money, but it can take a little bit more time. And I think that's just on a case-by-case basis, something that a trade-off that companies need to evaluate.
So another shift in terms of what investors want is what consumers and patients and health systems want. We're entering this era of not just healthcare, but self-health, or the ability for patients themselves to go get their body scans or do a function health lab, or access GLP-1s through Lilly. Any sort of seismic shifts you're seeing in terms of the markets and what they need, particularly at the convergence of technology and the empowered consumer?
That's a great question. I don't know if it's a seismic shift, but definitely seeing an evolutionary shift in that kind of move. And we're kind of interesting in New Mexico in that we have a very, very large rural population. I mean, you've got maybe 3 cities with significant population. None of our cities are over 1 million people, but Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Las Cruces. And once you get beyond that, it's an extremely rural state. And the current state of the healthcare there is honestly pretty dire. So there's a real need, and we have many local rural facilities and clinics closing. We have a very high Native American population, which has a difficulty of accessing health care. To use a well-worn phrase, we'd love to find a way to democratize a lot of this cool stuff. I mean, while I'm a techie too, I just love all this stuff that I see about the future and the potential, and it's just so exciting. But then how do we bring that effectively to the rest of the population? And then as a venture investor, how do we make this a venture or an investment that makes sense? I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Daniel, but some of the things we've been thinking about a lot as a venture firm, how do we do good in the world, but also how do we make good investments for our investors?
Right, in terms of rural populations, even rural California to the west, there's huge swaths where there's not a pediatric psychiatrist available or surgeon, huge surgical deserts. So I think one opportunity for the medtech world is this sort of, remote patient monitoring meets hospital to home, meets next generation of telehealth, to sort of bring care anytime, anywhere. But often connecting the dots and aligning the incentives and the payment models and the culture of medicine. I'm a traditionally trained physician. The interventional cardiologists are a little more cowboy, they'll try things, but the neurologists or the OB-GYNs are much more conservative. And then, of course, who's got the hammer and paint at these things often takes sometimes much longer than the exponentials of technology shift.
Just to jump in on that, I think that for us there is definitely a theme that we're looking at around convenience in healthcare. So things around what can be delivered at the home, how can patients be more empowered to take charge of their own care. And so we're very excited about technologies that do that. I think that to that point, there are sort of 2 things that we do keep in mind when we look at companies that are working on that. One is how durable is the business model. So with something like remote patient monitoring or hospital at home, there's a lot of sort of regulatory and policy components to that. And so part of what we're thinking about is how adaptable is this company if there are changes and how these things are paid for. And I think the second thing is we are also looking at, in some cases, things that are more direct to consumer. And when you look at consumer health applications, we do want to be sensitive to what's happening in terms of the macroeconomic picture. Are there going to be things that put pressure on people's wallets? Are they more sensitive to inflation? Is that going to cause them to cut back on spending on some of these things? So I think there is a lot of excitement there, and then a couple of pieces that sometimes temper that. Mm-hmm.
Just really want to quickly also comment on for our company, this what we also observe doing the customer market fit analysis are super important. So very often we see a company spend so much money and so long working on the product, yet it's just because of the very tiny small detail that was lack of communication with clinician that failed. So so before you really launch a product or spend all this money, you really need to have some physician involved, making sure that is truly the market need.
And I think one thing that's in the consumerization side, now everyone's used to Uber. Everyone kind of wants the easy button to access, whether it's their home-based phlebotomy or to interface with their wearable devices. So some exciting companies are kind of leveraging that, the APIs and the big data to bring care anywhere. The challenge often is bringing that into the workflow, and the Epics and the Epic EMRs often aren't friendly to pulling those things in. So the art of the possible is here. Sometimes the implementation science is the challenge. And I know when we're looking at companies from my fund, it's the ones that are most interesting are leveraging those convergent points and not just thinking about technology of 2025, but where it might be with ChatGPT 8 and the $10 genome and the sensor that will do blood pressure. So on that point, what gets you guys excited? You meet an entrepreneur here, a startup. What makes you lean forward in your chair? So we're going to have folks pitching us, and what are some of the magic, sometimes hard to qualify elements that make you excited when you hear a new pitch? Any of you?
I think the investment potential aside, just looking at technology, I think you just hit on it, Daniel. One thing that excites us is some kind of convergent technology. And it's gotten harder to define, what is MedTech, what is biotech, what is healthtech. We've invested in a few companies where it really goes across all three to some degree. For example, we have one company that is taking already approved biotech drugs and found a new way to deliver those drugs through a MedTech device, and also using AI to help diagnose the effectivity of those drugs. Those kind of things excite us a lot. And again, given the current environment, anything that helps validate the pathway that they're going along, whether it's early clinical validation or of course we want some kind of unmet clinical need. That helps a lot, but that gets us excited.
Yeah, I think we're in the same boat, and I'd say sort of the one piece that gets us to lean forward in our chair more than anything else is the piece around clinical validation and seeing data that suggests that this is really making a dent on an unmet clinical need. I'd say that's the piece that we're most excited about.
Yeah, so definitely that is a very critical piece when you make the investment decision. So in addition to that, we also look at other factors, for instance, the team themselves, whether, for instance, a founder has a great track record with, let's say, if you have several exits, that's definitely a great thing. And if the company really clearly know the market, for instance, a great question is you can clearly state why you're better than other players in the market. That is super important. So very often we see company coming in and they have no clue or they don't really know why they're better. Oh, we're better because we're 20% cheaper than the biggest players in the market, or there's no such, there's no competitor in the market. So that just means you don't really know the market so well. And we wanted the company to also have a really clear exit strategy. And also timeline. So very often we see physicians or scientists working on the product doesn't really pay much attention to the commercialization process. So that is some like a red flag for us as well. So those are all the quite important factors we're looking into.
Sure. I mean, you look for outcomes, or what you get what you measure, and sometimes the old-fashioned things you measure, tumor size or some metric are shifting now with our digital exhaust, the ability to now do clinical trials virtually. Some of the sort of soft endpoints might be more relevant than some of the others. So it all comes down to what you measure and often the incentives, and the incentives traditionally are sort of fee-for-service and sick care. Have you guys been investing in any things that might align more with value-based care? And because you guys cross different markets, are there good examples of startups that are in your portfolio that are shifting given the shifting incentives and payment models?
Yeah, great point. Yeah, we've seen that with one of our companies that kind of started out as almost a hardware company that was using AI, and now they've kind of shifted to say, okay, the hardware is now more the commodity, and really it's not even the AI, it's the diagnostic capability of that AI. What this particular company is doing is using something called oculomics and looking at the back of the retina and using AI to diagnose various disease states, looking at the back of the retina. And diabetic retinopathy is the one that has been, I think, looked at by a few companies. And they're looking at this as a possible platform for diagnosing other diseases by looking at the back of the retina. But the idea is to put this capability into the hands of the GP and use this as a primary screening tool and some kind of fee per service. They're still working out the commercial model, but we think there's something behind that.
Yeah, I think that to your point, we do see different levels of that happening across some of the different sectors that we're investing in. So I think that some of the interesting technologies we see, if something is, for instance, a surgical tool, most of those businesses are still focused around fee-for-service model. That's the way to grow and get to a successful exit. Increasingly, though, we are seeing, especially in areas in digital health, things that involve patient monitoring, increasing access, some of those tools, we are seeing more and more value-based care models, and I think that's something that'll inevitably continue to grow.
All right, we've got like 3 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you to put your futurist hat on. So not what investors want in 2025, but let's go to 2030 and 2035. What predictions might you have, or what companies might you be looking to fund in the next decade that might be a little bit out of the normal MedTech constraints?
One thing we hear a lot about now in New Mexico, it's been designated as a national hub for quantum computing. We've had some companies approach us and say, oh yeah, we're going to leverage quantum computing for this application. And honestly, I don't fully understand what quantum computing can bring to the picture in biotech and medtech, and many of our companies don't either. But I'm trying to educate myself and learn more about it. And somehow there's going to be this, I think, convergence of quantum computing, which will bring tremendous computational power to things like working on digital twins or almost the next generation of AI. And I'm actually going to a talk on Monday to learn more about it from an expert at Los Alamos. And wow, it's just an exciting future. I can't even begin to think how this is going to transform healthcare.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, in some ways, one way to think about it is, if we want to look 5 years forward, let's take a look 5 or 10 years back. And I mean, the reality is healthcare moves a little bit slowly. So things have changed, but maybe not as much as one might have guessed. That being said, I do think that there are going to be changes in what we're thinking about in the next 5 to 10 years. We only touched on a little bit. Certainly AI is going to be one of those things. I do think that we need to be careful, as you alluded to earlier, Chris, around how exactly you go about pursuing that and what exactly that means. But there will be more of those applications. I think that also some of the themes that we've talked about will continue to evolve. So I think consumerization and convenience in healthcare. And then I think personalization of care. So that piece will continue to grow over the next few years.
So I think AI in drug discovery I personally think there's a really a hype of that sector. So probably many of you have read the news a couple of months ago. FDA just announced a plan in monoclonal antibody field. They're going to replace the animal experiment with a cell line, organoid, and also AI use. But I really don't think it's ready yet from so many perspectives now. When you look at the clinical validation, for instance, there's no AI designed molecules has got FDA approval. Most of them failed in phase 2. There's so many reasons. For instance, the biological complexity, like human being, the environment is so complex, and we don't really, there's so much unknown. And plus, like there's really lacking of all this interaction data of how this molecule interact with a human. So the molecule, currently, all this molecule may work in silico, but in human being, the body is a different story. And also currently all the data are still, when you're looking at the overall quality, are still noisy, incomplete, and also biased. So without this thorough big data set to train, it's just so difficult to make reliable predictions. But I completely, I have a big belief in AI in drug discovery because it can really help so many ways for this targeted prediction, helping this de novo drug design, and so forth, so many ways. It's just that we're not there yet, so that would take some time.
Yeah, I think we also have to look at the reality of adoption of new technologies in the healthcare system, especially here in the U.S. I remember 20 years ago, or 25 years ago maybe, back when I was at GE, we were working on a very early version of AI for detection of lung cancer on CT scans. And even though it had I forget the effectivity, it's something like a 90% positive rate or whatever, but we had a lot of problems getting it through regulatory, and it kind of died on the vine for a while, then it kind of came back later. So as exciting as all this stuff is, it is hard to get it through through the realities of our medical system here. On the other hand, just the other day I saw this YouTube video on a full AI hospital in China, which just absolutely blew my mind. I'll send you guys the link if you hadn't seen it. So I think there's another panel on this later today, but I think it's important to look globally at what's happening as well. Although here in the U.S. we're traditionally at the top edge of technology development. It's maybe starting to shift a little bit, and maybe that's a controversial topic to speak about as well, but it's important to open our eyes for what's going on around the world and the many other technologies being.
A lot of things are going to leapfrog the traditional Western models because there's much more unmet need and there's less infrastructure in the global South, for example. So just as a close, I just remind everybody, we know Moore's Law is accelerating. We're at the Computer History Museum yesterday, many of us. You can see in the museum there the pace of change and how it accelerates. Quantum computing maybe supplants Moore's Law. But there's something also called Amara's Law, which is, in summary, that we tend to overhype or overestimate what might arrive in 2 years, but underestimate what will be here in a decade. And I think this superconvergence and changes in mindsets, hopefully we can bring our regulators and health systems and payers along with us, really opens up an amazing art of possibility for MedTech and beyond, again, at that convergence point to meet all these pain points and unmet needs in much more personalized and hopefully more available ways. So with that, I want to thank our panel. I hope to mix it up with all of you here later today, and let's create the future of MedTech and beyond. Thanks, everyone.